Good afternoon. It is still the 13th of May, Wednesday, the Ways and Means Committee room. It is 3:15. We are picking up S-278 for first walkthrough. We will get the fiscal note tomorrow from Ted. Thanks everyone for your patience coming back here. Thank you for coming up here with no notice. Really appreciate it.
Welcome.
Or here.
So Sophie Sadani for the Office of Legislative Counsel. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Is that big enough for everybody?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
So this is the cannabis bill. The version I'm showing you is the version that was voted out of Government Operations and Military Affairs this morning. So again, there's a lot of provisions here. So if you want me just to hone in on particular ones, let me know. But otherwise, I'll just run through with a big overview.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Just like a section.
Okay. Yeah. So section 1 provides, and this is to do with packaging. It's not to do with the amount of cannabis in a product. It's to do with the size of the packaging. So it's sort of been analogized to a 6-pack versus a 12-pack of alcohol. It doesn't change the amount of alcohol in the individual can. So this is just providing that single packages of cannabis, increasing the amount from 100 milligrams to 200 milligrams. This is in section 1. The following 3 sections then address, because of that change, then address the amount that can be sold in section 2. So a retailer can provide 2 ounces of cannabis or the equivalent. And then in sections 3 and 4, it deals with, on the criminal side, to do with possession and cultivation, and increases the amount from 1 ounce to 2 ounces, or 5 to 10 grams of hashish, etc. And then the same in section 4 deals with cannabis possession. So those are the first 4 sections, are really dealing with that larger package amount that can be sold. Is there any questions on that? Okay. Section 5 creates a pilot program for events. When the bill came over from the Senate, there were 2 pilot programs. One was for event permits and one was for delivery permits. House Government Operations took out the delivery permits, so this now just keeps in a pilot program for event. And they also restricted, before there were up to 20 permits, 10 public, 10 private events. House GovOps changed that to being 5 private, 5 public, so 10 permits.
In the whole state in the course of a year.
Right, and it's a 2-year pilot program. So you'll see at the end, there's a repeal provision after 2 years. So
is there anything about how they'll pick which the 5 are? How will they pick the 5?
yeah, there are some parameters in here. So the board is permitted to grant the licenses. They, again, to administer, eligibility, and then there are requirements. Again, just quickly going through this, there are requirements regarding, what has to happen in order to have an event permit. So again, this provides some power to local municipalities to control this. But I do believe it has language in here. So 5. This is the language on 5 permits for public, 5 for private. It cannot be issued for a location at which alcoholic beverages are sold. So you can't have a public event that has both alcohol and cannabis at it. And
Not here jurisdiction, but so here.
My understanding is the concern is around the ability to distinguish when people have been overserved, and the combination of both alcohol and cannabis making it difficult to assess that. But again, this is not my area of expertise, so I don't know more than that.
It does still be available.
So penalties and then a fee. So this would be of interest to you. Subsection E provides that there would be a $500 fee for an event permit, and 50% of that would go to the municipality, 50% would go to the Cannabis Regulation Fund. And then in subsection F, there are procedures. So again, this gives the board a lot of discretion around these event permits. And to answer the question that was just raised, the board shall include a requirement that permits are issued equitably among cannabis establishment license categories. So there are these different categories of cannabis establishments, and this is to make sure that they're more equitably distributed. And then this just goes through the procedures for the board. So section 6, so we're on page 7. Section 6 deleted, that was the delivery permit that was deleted. Section 7 deals with cannabis excise tax. So there's a couple of sections here, and these are 7, 8, and 9. These are just conforming provisions. So if you have an event permit, to make sure that the holder of the event permit is also complying with the cannabis excise tax. So this just is adding in the holder of an event permit. So again, not specific change, it's just conforming changes. I'll talk about the integrated licensee change in just a second. So again, these changes in Title 32 are just to recognize the event permit holders are also covered. So section 10, this is getting into the Cannabis Control Board engaging in rulemaking around the event permit. And again, this is to make sure it's a pilot program to evaluate it. So again, the list of what they'll be looking at. So the benefits, challenges, administrative viability, and then whether or not the repeal statute should be repealed itself. In other words, continue doing event permits. So right now it's just a 2-year provision.
I think if there's best practices for tax enforcement and permit administration, we should probably be on that report. We should probably be listed on the report.
Okay.
It includes tax enforcement.
Okay. Section 10A is outdoor cultivator fees. What this section does is it essentially, not mathematically for all of them, but basically reduces the outdoor cultivator license fees in half. And the only one being cultivator tier 2, that's not mathematically half, but all the others are. And this section would only go into effect if $105,000 is appropriated to the Cannabis Control Board to replace those fees. So that would go into the Cannabis Regulation Fund. So if there is no transfer of that money, then this reduction in outdoor cultivator fees would not happen. And when we get to the effective date, this would go into effect for January 1 of 2027.
Wait, can you go back up for 1 second?
Yeah. So this just cut for outdoor cultivators, it cuts their license fees in half
But each is going,
for each one, but only.
they're all going in half rather than some sort of tiered.
Right, they're all going in half except for outdoor cultivator tier 2, because mathematically that's not half, but the others are all half.
Without trying to guess as to the intent, but in your discussions and their deliberations, was it because there haven't been that many people sign up for those particular outdoor cultivator licenses? They figured drop the fee and you'll get more?
No, the rationale was that outdoor cultivators have very limited seasons. So if you're doing indoor cultivation, you've got way more opportunity to grow. An outdoor is just riskier, and you may only have one season. So that was the thought behind it.
And Pepper's gonna come in, is scheduled to come in on Friday when Ted comes in, but he can also Zoom in after this if we have time.
That amount that you mentioned that has to come in to have this happen. Where is the wording for that? Is it on the
It's-
effective dates?
Yes, it's at the end. I'm just flagging it now, so when we get there.
Thank you.
All right, section 11 deals with municipal authority, and this is providing that, again, municipalities have to vote to opt in to allowing cannabis retail establishments. But this provides that a proposal to hold a vote may be made by the legislative body of the municipality or by a petition of 5% of the voters of the municipality. So it just gives voters an opportunity to weigh in if they want to have that vote. And again, I'll get to integrated licenses in a moment. That's just conforming stuff. And then this provides that municipalities can regulate signs or public nuisances relating to cannabis establishments, but that regulation does not apply to tier 1 manufacturers, or which is the addition, or outdoor cultivators. So again, outdoor cultivators are already regulated under the required agricultural practices, but this adds in tier 1 manufacturers at the municipal level. And then subsection D here just makes some changes to the language. And this is to make sure essentially that if a municipality was to vote in favor of having a cannabis establishment, that the municipality itself could not then adopt such prohibitive regulations to effectively prevent that cannabis establishment from occurring. So this is intended to prevent that from happening, the language in here. So section 12, this is just a shift. Again, these are, I mean, Pepper can follow up on these, but these are really just sort of technical corrections for the Cannabis Control Board. So this just provides, rather than distributing local license fees to municipalities on a quarterly basis, that it's done on an annual basis. And it's I think, for efficiency purposes and reducing administrative costs. Section 13, again, these are just some changes. So instead of having annual fees, it's the same amount of the fee, but now it's biannual. So it goes from annual of $50 per employee to biannual of $100. And then the employee licenses are valid for 2 years. And this, I believe this section goes into effect next summer, so not this summer, to give them time to make the IT changes at the Cannabis Control Board. It also provides that the board can choose to, so it may issue longer product registrations if it chooses. And again, Pepper can talk to you about that. It doesn't require them to do so, but there are license fees for all the different kinds of products, and some of them may have longer shelf life. And so this just gives the board the ability to move that forward if they so choose. Section 14, and this goes through.
I guess it was like yesterday or the day before, we had a briefing on safer products. And I was curious whether those same products are available for cannabis as well.
I am definitely
Tobacco.
not the right person to ask about the variety of cannabis products available, but my understanding is there are vape products, and we had a discussion about that in House GovOps this morning. So there are a variety. I mean, there's edibles and flour and different
We're going
products.
to talk more about it, but what we're regulating in the bill we got from Human Services and Commerce is the like vape delivery device. And then I've genuinely never used this, just explaining how it works. And then you buy a cartridge, and it can be a cartridge of a tobacco substitute, or it can be a cartridge of cannabis products. And the cartridge goes into the vape object, and then you vape it from there. And so there's sort of separate products. Tobacco delivery devices can be sold at cannabis stores, but they're actually, I believe, regulated by Department of Liquor and Lottery, not by the Cannabis Control Board. And someone in testimony said that you actually want a different temperature. I think it was Pepper, that you want a higher temperature for cannabis than you do for tobacco. And so it's actually a little bit problematic, it's one of the reasons they want the objects to be regulated more closely.
There also be the sale, these products.
I think if it's just an object, I don't know. That's a good question. My understanding was what was getting stamped was the thing that had the tobacco product in it, not the delivery device. And so I don't know if like how a delivery device is. That's a great question for witnesses, because there's also like hookah is a hookah is a delivery device, right?
All right, so you will have seen as we've gone through this, there's been crossing out of integrated licenses. So these next sections, 14 through 22, but then some of the earlier ones as well, are just deleting the reference to integrated licenses. Those have been phased out and they no longer exist. So I'm going to just very quickly go through sections 14 to 22 because these are all just removing references to integrated licenses in those sections that haven't already had them removed in the prior sections.
Let's get involved with something.
Right.
I don't know. Oh, look.
Section 23 was deleted by House GovOps. This was a section that would have provided, so there is a, should I get the right name here? There's a cannabis business development fund, which was intended to provide the social equity piece. That fund is running low on the amount of money in it. This section 23 would have expanded who could access that fund to tier 1 cultivators, tier 1 manufacturers, and businesses granted economic empowerment status by the board. This morning, House Government Operations heard that there's not that much money left in that fund, and the one of the later sections, section 28, was deleted by Senate Operations, which would have put more money into that fund. So given that the money to go into the fund was taken out, Government Operations removed the section that would have opened up that fund to other people being able to access it. All right.
Can you go back up?
Sure.
They also removed the cannabis business expense deduction.
That's what we're just getting into.
Oh, so sorry. Okay. Yeah, sorry, I was just reading it wrong.
All right.
I thought you were saying it was deleted.
No, that section 23 was deleted, right. So section 24, and I'm going to just read on this, contains definitions applicable to the calculation of the property tax credit for household income to include cannabis business deductions within the definition of modified adjusted gross income. This is a provision that will be retroactive, and again, we'll get to that with the effective dates. Again, you may want to ask other folks about sort of the meaning of this. My understanding is these were changes that came from the tax department and that they were comfortable with these changes. So this is just allowing, so. And then section 25 is dealing with,
Wait, let's pause for a minute.
Sure.
Okay.
can't get it all on this, so I could just shrink it down a bit, so it's on.
So my understanding of this, and we can also have Kirby maybe explain this part more, or Pepper, but basically that because cannabis isn't legal federally, we need special provisions in statute in order to have it be treated like any other business in Vermont tax law. Does that make sense? So they can just like do regular expensing and stuff.
Right, because people benefit from expensing and their expenses.
Yeah, right. All right.
Do you folks want to hear more about that from tax people?
Yeah, I think so, because again, I'm curious to know whether or not for sure that it meets federal standards in regards to cannabis being still a Schedule III product, right? So can we do this and not get into trouble?
With our check.
That, yeah, taxable.
Yeah.
Of a product that's, illegal
Yeah.
still.
Fiona? can you ask, tax department and Kirby to come in when we pick this bill up again on Friday, I guess it is? Thanks.
All right. Section
Sorry,
25.
I'm not-
Oh, no, go ahead, Sophie, go through. And then I'll circle back to my comment.
Section 25 provides that cultivators who cultivate cannabis outdoors pursuant to the board's rules qualify for existing for outdoor cultivators using use value appraisal and certain tax exemptions under Title 32. So again, this would be another provision that you might want the tax folks to weigh in on. So it's just making them eligible to enroll in the use value appraisal program and be exempt. And then section 26, this provides that the tax commissioner can share information with the Cannabis Control Board for purposes of administrating the cannabis excise tax, sales tax, and use tax on cannabis, and any other exemption. So this is just where the confidential records, it just gives the CCB the ability to see those records. Section 27 would allow cannabis cultivators to form a cannabis cultivator cooperative corporation in the same manner that they can do under Title 11. Section 27A, this is a commercial cannabis compact. This is just anticipating some of the changes that are happening at the federal level. And the goal is to make sure that Vermont is kind of prepared for, as things get, reclassified at the federal level. So Section 27A contains the intent language. So this is that the General Assembly essentially is going to allow the governor to form agreements with other states that have commercial cannabis markets. So it would be to allow them to enter into a cannabis compact agreement. And then 27B lists
Contingent or something? The compact, is it contingent on like something changing?
yes. So 27B then lists out kind of the
Not being very patient today, I'm sorry.
That's all right. So this lists out, so it's got the definitions in it. And then as it goes through, it has the governor's authorized to enter into it, provided that the commercial cannabis activities are lawful, subject to licensure under the laws of the contracting state, has language around transportation. So again, you can't transport, if that's prohibited by another state. That foreign licensees can engage in commercial cannabis activity with Vermont licensees. That foreign licensees, and again, foreign being other folks within the United States, not necessarily international, that they would need to be work within, the rules here in Vermont. An agreement that would require that the contracting state have essentially that whatever our requirements are, that those are the same requirements in the state with whom Vermont would be contracting. And again, these are the kinds of things, possibly public health and safety standards, mandatory participation in a system administered by this state to regulate and track cultivation, etc., standards for testing, requirements for packaging and labeling, requirements for quality assurance and inspection, and restrictions on marketing, labeling, and advertising, a process for identifying adulterated or misbranded cannabis products. The agreement would require the contracting state impose, again, those same restrictions, provide for the collection of all taxes, include provisions requiring the board, etc. So again, this is just giving the option that if things open up, that Vermont's in a position to be able to work with other states that have regulated markets cooperatively. So Vermont products could be sold in those states and vice versa. I don't know if anyone wants any more details. Anyway, and then if the governor's going to move forward with this, there are requirements in terms of submitting the agreement to the Joint Fiscal Committee,
Oh, wait, sorry, one second. You go back up. Yeah, but the is there? It's for a comment. And then the governor considers and may revise, but doesn't have to revise.
If the governor does not incorporate any recommendations.
So tell you why.
And yes,
Okay.
give me the reasons why not. Has to be posted. And then, we asked about contingencies. An agreement entered into under this section won't take effect unless one of the following occurs. So federal law is amended to allow for the interstate transfer of cannabis or cannabis products between authorized commercial cannabis businesses. Federal law is enacted that specifically prohibits the expenditure of federal funds to prevent the interstate transfer of cannabis. The U.S. Department of Justice issues an opinion or memorandum allowing or tolerating interstate transfer of cannabis products, or the Attorney General issues a written opinion that the implementation of agreements entered into under this section will not result in significant legal risk to the state based on a review of federal judicial decisions and administrative action. And then the Cannabis Control Board would then let the governor and the General Assembly know if any of those contingencies have occurred. And the board can then enact emergency rules. Section 28 that's deleted, that was the appropriation that was taken out by Senate Appropriations. Repeals, so again, the integrated licenses no longer exist, so that's repealed effective July 1, 2026. The subsection B there, 862, that is a provision. There are two provisions, 862 and 862A, that are in conflict. This removes 862 because my understanding is the Cannabis Control Board will now have some jurisdiction over hemp. So this would be inconsistent with that. And then subsection C is the cannabis event permit. So it's a 2-year pilot. So it's currently scheduled to be repealed on July 1 of 2028. Then this provision, section 30, provides that this is to do with landlords and residential rental premises. So rental agreements cannot prohibit a tenant from possessing cannabis or cannabis products within the rental premises or using cannabis or cannabis products within a dwelling unit, except a rental agreement may prohibit the use of lighted cannabis or cannabis products intended for inhalation within the rental premises. And again, this section shall not apply to any rental agreements that are required by federal law to prohibit the possession or use of cannabis within the rented premises. So again, that's to deal with the, federal restrictions around Section 8, right? So the purpose of this is to allow individuals to be able to use cannabis products that don't generate smoke or odor or residue. So for example, like edibles, etc., that they would be permitted to possess and use those within their dwelling unit. And then section 31 is just a corresponding provision that just reflects that. So this section does not prohibit a landlord from banning the use of lighted cannabis or cannabis products intended for inhalation in a lease agreement. And then finally,
For a second, sorry.
Sure.
Session part, but just a little further up. For a tenant, may prohibit the use of lighted cannabis.
sorry, which bit? This one?
Just keep going up a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Just wondering about, yeah, sorry. All right, there.
Which line, Charlie?
Right there on 4 and 5 on that page, whatever line Sophie's on. I'm just wondering if someone legal possession of certain amounts, wondering about that. If someone has bales of cannabis, can that be prohibited?
So I guess it would permit, the goal here is basically to allow renters to be able to possess cannabis products, but a landlord can still choose to prevent them from smoking or inhaling or any of the things that create an odor or potential damage to the rental property. because there's no public consumption, et cetera. So there's my understanding is the issue is that there's really nowhere, although the law allows people to purchase
I
cannabis,
think you're getting
they
into,
may not be able to consume it. So,
I think you're getting into a scale that's more of an intent to sell.
Yes,
And I think that would be a different area of things.
hey, I could have it, you know.
I think there are other
Speak to that when he gets here.
criminal activity, I think, is grounds for. um, All right, and then the last section here is the effective dates. So again, that change on the one that we were talking about, the adjusted gross income, that would be retroactive to January 1, so that folks could apply that to a property tax credit claim for January 1, 2026. That change in the outdoor cultivator fee that was halving it, that would only take effect January 1, 2027, and provided that before that date, the General Assembly has appropriated or transferred $105,000 to the Cannabis Regulation Fund to replace the anticipated lost revenue. And then section 13, that would take effect July 1, 2027. And that was the provision around the change in the, to make sure I've got the right one. That was the employee licenses going from being annual to biannual. And again, that's more to do with just IT changes. And then everything else would be to take effect of July 1 of this year.
A rental agreement prohibit the use of tobacco products?
Yes.
What's the reasoning for reducing the amount for the outdoor cultivators, but still trying to reap 105,000? Why didn't they just, if they thought it was so important to reduce that amount for those cultivators, not just reduce the amount? Are they really that hard up for 105,000?
So that would be a question you probably would want to address to Pepper when he testifies, but my understanding is that that those fees go towards funding the Cannabis Control Board. So I think it's just making sure that if there's less fees coming in, that there's still some funding there for the board. But Pepper will probably answer that better.
Thanks.
Yeah, will that be ongoing every year, 105,000?
I don't believe it's framed that way. The payment, it's just that 105,000 by January 1 of 2027 goes into that fund. So I think that's just a one-time payment into the fund. But the fees, obviously the lost fee revenue would continue, but that's not addressed.
Any other questions for Sophie?
And the general comment when it's appropriate.
Okay, let's, do folks want to ask Pepper a few questions now or wait until Friday when we get Ted and the fiscal note and all that stuff?
Or it's whatever.
We're getting more. Do it all at once.
Okay, great, okay. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Did you had wanted to be added, this committee to be
Yes.
added in, do you want me to draft that?
Yes, please.
Then for committee, I'll do
Is
that.
that okay with everyone?
Yeah, of course.
Really need another report. Jim, you had a comment.
Well, over the years, we have had wine tasting permits, various other use permits, as we know. And on the one hand, I can see that these things are similar. They're both controlled circumstances, substances in their own way, and we allow permits with fee applied, and money goes where it goes for a purpose. I find it a little comical, years on since I was in college, that we're now proposing, and maybe we'll go ahead and have cannabis use permits, without putting other funny words in there. I just find this thing amusing, although not surprising. It's quite consistent with what we've done with wine tasting and other kinds of things, so I'll reserve my chuckles for out of the room, I guess, or something.
I mean, I think we're so, like our wedding industry, our tourism industry, the beer festivals, the mic, like all, we've invested so much in consumption-based economic growth, and this is a real place for that. Yeah.
That's good. No,
Totally, yeah.
So you say you were adversely affected by the prohibition on marijuana back in the day and were upset about that whole like.
We're gonna get- Representative Higley's wondering if you need reparations.